Hello everyone, I welcome you all to my Swayam course titled Comics and Graphic Novels in Indian Context. Today we will be beginning with week 7 of our course, which is titled as Counter Reality Through Graphic Visuality. This will be lecture 1, which is based on Orijit Sen's graphic novel River of Stories. River of Stories is usually considered one of the very first and primary graphic novels in India. Orijit Sen's River of Story was published in 1994 with funding support from the environmentalist NGO Kalpavriksha. The graphic narrative is mostly based on his fieldwork in the Narmada Valley. In the book, the fictional name Reva is mentioned instead of Narmada, and much of the narrative is a fictionalized account of Narmada Valley project. It remains a semi-fictional work that centers around the social and environmental movements which were directed against the construction of dams across the Narmada River. It is one of the first semi-fictional graphic novels in India and is considered to be a pioneering work in India. River of Stories, as the title of the graphic novel suggests, it is based on Orijit Sen thought of taking a tour of the Narmada Valley when all kinds of protests and activists had made their base against the state policies where deforestation was happening, where people were being displaced, where immense flora and fauna of the very rich, very diverse flora and fauna of the Narmada Valley was being destroyed in the wake of development, in the wake of making industries, in the wake of undertaking deforestation practices that were being done enormously in this region. So it was published in 1994. So we can place this very graphic novel as the precursor or something which happened in a post-liberalized India, because this is a graphic novel which is based on kind of raising an awareness amongst the people for becoming eco-friendly, raising an awareness about environmental protection acts, about the need for saving our environment and the kind of effects that this destruction is leaving. For example, there is a rise of temperature every year, global warming, the kind of the glaciers are melting, and so many other things that are happening because of our blind eye towards environmental issue and the way in which mankind is kind of destroying. It has turned a blind eye towards any kind of environmental acts that are being taken by the tribal and the people living to save that particular region, which is very much rich in the vegetation, which is very much rich, or which has become who have also become kind of dependent on the very flora and fauna, the very kind of vegetation, the very kind of diversity that exists in a particular region. So it is both not only the environment but also the people dependent, the tribes, the small tribes, people living in that particular region, they are also being impacted through these matchless and through this infinite acts which are being taken in the name of development, in the name of progressive nation. So this was one of those times when many MNCs had come to India. As I said, we were living in a post-liberal economy, and as a result of it, most of the land in India was now being cleared for many of the development projects that were passed. For example, Narmada Valley project was proposed that this valley will be destroyed and a dam will be built, and as a result of it, many NGOs, many activists, many journalists, there was an immense commotion. There was a lot of commotion during those time, and everybody tried their level best that the valley must be retained and it should not be destroyed. So Orijit Sen is one of the graphic novelists who takes a tour of the region along with other NGOs and journalists, and he's he decides to illustrate everything that he sees, whatever he sees, in detail in his sketchbook, in the pictures that he's drawing from the Narmada Valley. He takes pictures, he tries to visualize, and it is through those through the journey that he makes in the valley, that this graphic novel has come out. The River of Stories is composed of black and white illustrations, albeit with two distinct visual modes depicting two different temporalities that run simultaneously with each other in the narrative structure of the book. One of them concerns the use of conventional Western comic medium to tell the story of Vishnu and the journey to Balanpur to find the truth regarding the construction of the Rewa Dam. So, when Orijit Sen had decided to undertake a journey, he kind of narrates this activism. He kind of narrates the incidents and events that are happening in that valley in a very metaphoric way, in a very mythological way, where mythology is, I would not say that the story is completely mythological, but mythology has been used to communicate because people tend to relate with mythology more than anything else. So he has used mythology in order to convey the message of the novel. The other mode presented comes in soft grey pencil drawings narrating the creation myth of the Adivasi and the song of the river sung by Malgu Gayan. Later on in the narrative, both these merge with their own temporalities and unique styles and feature, ultimately echoing the flow of river itself. So there's a diverse mix of artwork. In some panels, you'll find very dense comic panels in the shape of the graphic novel, as we studied with Art Spiegelman and other eminent graphic novelists. And in some other pages, you will find just, very dense, very cluttered images, because in order to give out, so what Orijit Sen says about his drawings in River of Stories is that for him it was very important to convey how valley looked like. So more than what people are talking, or more than anything else, that what was the atmosphere, who were the people who had come there, and what were their responses to such deforestation. He wanted to capture the essence, he wanted to capture the emotions, he wanted to capture that very vibe, that very moment in the most visual form possible, so that whenever a reader chooses to pick up something like a graphic novel, River of Stories, they are kind of taken back in time, and they also get to relive how it felt like being in the Narmada Valley at that point of time when the valley was facing immense deforestation. So I have quoted few excerpts from Orijit Sen's interview where he is talking about this particular novel. I quote, "I was really trying to look at everything and understand it through a visual language. I had to categorize types of trees, plants, agricultural landscapes, water bodies, architecture, layouts of villages and houses, placements of things, objects, everyday life, etc." So he's trying to be as detailed as possible, so that he gives out, even if you see the cover image of River of Stories, it's all cluttered, a man's face is there, then there is a river flowing, then the vegetation which is on the both sides of the river, all the boats as well as some temples, in a very minute state, as if somebody is looking from at the valley down there, and then he has tried to capture the entire landscape with a camera angle. He's tried to reproduce it how he looked at the valley. So he says that trees, plants, agriculture. So even the kind of trees, there were certain kind of trees which were very big, which had too many leaves, which had leaves in a certain way. Those are also drawn in a very distinguished manner, so as to be able to let the reader feel that the valley was so rich in vegetation, and it was how dreadful, how devilish it would be to clear off such a valley where so much vegetation, animals, the other living species, and so many flowers, seeds, people, the tribal community who were living there, and it would be so devilish to replace all of them, to just vanish, to just ask them to move from there as the development projects were being taken off there. I'm usually obsessed with capturing the visual details of a place. For me, I think that tells half the story. The characters in the foreground and what they are saying is important, but what's happening in the background is equally important. I remember, even as a kid, I used to find it irritating how in Amar Chitra Katha, for example, the trees were just like the generic wavy trees. So just as I said, for him it is very important if the trees are there. It's not that trees are not in the background and the human being is not in the center of everything that is happening around. If the trees are there, trees also have certain kind of characteristic. Trees are also noticed. They are also a symbol. They are also acting just like the humans are acting in a comic narrative. So for him, trees are something as essential, as unique, and as important as drawing any other human character. And he felt that, in the comic books that was produced during his childhood, including the Amar Chitra Katha, trees were, it was just the human landscape that kind of took the front stage, and everything else, including animals, birds, bees, mountains, natural imagery and landscape, was all treated as a kind of scenery in the background. A comic is an experience that you can re-enter, you can keep on re-entering it and disappear into this other world. So this is the primary motive of the graphic novels that is drawn by Orijit Sen. That every time you pick up his graphic novel, every time you pick up his work, he wants his readers, his viewers to be able to relive the moment in which he has drawn that particular graphic novel. So when I was making River of Stories, I deeply wanted to convey that same sense to my readers. I wanted them to feel like they were entering the Narmada Valley when they read that book. Like you said, today we live with a flood of imagery. It reduces our wonder at the new kind of space, where the quality of light is different, the air feels different. I want to convey those feelings. So he just wants to be so much, the imagery, the visual should be so much powerful as to be able to generate the sense or the feeling in its readers or viewers what kind of smell this flower must have given. They are kind of able to assume what kind of movement did this dog make, or where was it sitting, or how was somebody talking to an old person. So every essence that could only be imagined, or it's a complete, it's not just eyesight that Orijit Sen wants his readers to focus on, but it's the involvement of all senses in order to be able to imagine that if a flower looked in a certain way, what would it have looked in reality? I mean, to be able to visualize everything and smell and touch and feel in the minds just by presenting it, drawing it in the graphic novel form. The part 1 of graphic novel River of Stories is titled as Spring. The River of Stories has been divided into 3 distinct sections: Spring, River and the Sea. The first part, titled Spring, includes the prologue, which features the semi-mythical figure called Malgu Gayan. It is Malgu Gayan, just Gayan is the Hindi term for singing also. That is why this person keeps on singing, and that is why he is named as Malgu Gayan. So it is Malgu Gayan who plays the instrument called Rangai and whose song echoes across the distance. Malgu Gayan in the prologue tells us how Kujum Chantu created the world and how then she filled the earth with humankind, animals and the whole of nature. So it is a kind of a tribal story which is being narrated, that somebody created the entire world in the image of some paradise where there were trees, where there were animals, and humanity was also put into that world so that they all can live together and build around a space and complement and supplement each other's needs. So it was the idea of harmonious living. It is this idea of harmonious living that was there with Kujung Chantu that actually created the world and then put all the human species, animals and natural imageries and natural species in it, other living species in it. Then the story cuts in and we are brought to the present times when a man named Vishnu meets Relku, the housemaid, to ask her about her home and why she migrated to the city. It is Relku's story which will provide a backdrop to the workings of the narrative. Relku's story. Relku, as she mentions, is an Adivasi and comes from the village Jamli, a few hours away from the town of Ballanpur. The story shifts to a different temporality and Relku starts narrating about her past. So Relku is somebody, as we saw, that she has become a housemaid in the city. So she is one of the displaced members of the tribal community who was asked to shift from a certain place, from a certain region, and she, as a result of it, she lost her home, she lost her hand, she lost all the resources that were there in that particular area, and consequently she had to go to the city and work there as a house helper. Relku mentions that before the forest authorities and the contractor came into their village, it remained highly peaceful and the people shared a direct correspondence with their natural environment. They could graze their cattle and collect grass to make ropes from the forest. However, these were all restricted once their forest came under government surveillance. The tension in Relku's story builds, in which a liquor shop owner and a person of influence, Rathorji, start lending Maru, Relku's uncle, liquor on credit basis. When Antriyo, Maru's brother, complains to Rathor to stop giving alcohol to his brother, Rathor vehemently becomes hostile. The conflict builds up when one night goons sent by Rathor threaten Antriyo at his house, where Relku and others live, to pay the 8,000 rupees to Rathor, which Maru owes to the latter for buying liquor in credit. Next morning, Antriyo lodges a police complaint against Rathor and his men, but it turns out to be in vain. The same night, Antriyo is attacked and later their house is set on fire. Relku laments how in the end they had to sell their land and give everything away to Rathor. Towards the end, they became migrants without any land or money, and just like a river, she flowed through her set of turmoils only to end up in the city as a housemaid. The second part of the story, which is titled as The River, concerns Vishnu deciding to journey into Ballanpur to understand the situation better. Vishnu is a reporter who works for The Voice. Vishnu reaches Ballanpur and meets up with Anand, a former engineer who has left his job to work in support of the Adivasi people and to prevent the construction of the dam from happening. The narrative again draws on Malgu Gayan, who sleeps for 12 years and snores for 13, who Rani Kajal and Ratu Kumai approach to awaken and take control of the situation. The construction works and modernization have destroyed the natural habitat, and this has made the animal population, such as bears and lions, to roar and create troubles for the community. Malgu Gayan then awakens and sends a letter to Reluka Bari to find the best wood from the trees to make himself a rangai. Reluka Bari is the father of river Riva. Clearly, this story is taking place in a very different temporality, but it intersects with the present narrative as the dam projects go full swing. Throughout the second part, there are protests and marches against the building of dams in the river Riva. Both parties present various arguments. Malgu Gayan gets his rangai and starts playing his song, which is attributed as a binding factor that draws everyone together. The animals return, and Vishnu's journey to meet the Adivasis is also attributed to the song of Malgu Gayan that fetched him from a distance, as is told by Anand. Part 3 of the book is titled as The Sea, and you see how the names are with spring, river and sea. following a small trajectory, how small tributaries of river then go on to become river, and then the river goes on to fall into the sea. So it is from it kind of gives you an impression that something bigger is going to happen from a very small narrowed down lens. It kinds of the graphic novel kinds of broaden the landscape and tries to give an impact that it is not just about very few people, but entire population, entire habitat that exists in this region is going to get affected. The references to the sea are made as River Riva must join with her husband Duda Hamad, the sea, as the river naturally merges into the ocean. Part 3 starts with the chairman of the National Water Commission resting with his wife on the beach when he is presented with the report that Vishnu published in Voice. The article soon became a matter of cross-city spaces and houses where everyone held their opinion. In response to the prestige attained by Vishnu's article, the business contract firm decided to tackle it through a press release countering Vishnu's article. It finally comes to an end when a minister in his helicopter sees a layman resting under the shade of a tree. This man with his rangai is Malgu Gayan himself. The minister decides to talk sense to the layman, addressing him to join the workforce of the country and get rich in order to enjoy his life. Sarcastically, Gayan replies by saying that is what he was doing until the minister in the noisy bird flew in and disturbed his peace. The narrative ends without a final closure on the fate of the river and the dam projects. Major themes of this graphic novel: the notion of development, and in particular the project of modernization, should not be ubiquitous to all cultures and regions. This is neatly handled by the River of Stories, where the Adivasi population questions the authority in what they'll do with all the modern facilities and wealth if they cannot live in their own land and carry on the traditions of their cultures. Displacement equates not only a physical and geographical separation, but that of culture and emotions too, the latter of which remains immensely connected to the place itself. Displacement and loss. Jamli village and much of the region surrounding Ballanpur have been relatively peaceful, with their people living in harmony with nature. The conflict arose when forest authorities and business giants wanted to grab hold of their land in banking humongous profits. However, the displacement of the villagers and the Adivasis hardly get any compensation or recognition. Relku strives in the city where her past just becomes a memory, and even Vishnu remained unaware of her story until recently when he wished to write an article on migrant workers' condition. Further, when confronted with authorial forces, villages like Antrio lose control and influence in their land and are reduced to mere enslaved people, as told in the conflict between Antrio against the police and Rathor. Countering reality through graphic narrative. Sen's graphic narrative makes brilliant use of storytelling accompanied by illustrations and even photography and the form of an article to critique the construction of dams across Narmada River symbolically. The usage of folk elements in the narrative in tandem with mythological aspects such as the mentioning of Kujum Chantu and Malgu Gayan allows Sen better to present the point or understanding of the Adivasi, almost involuntarily drawing the reader in favor of the Adivasis and their fight. The combination of varied temporalities and blending them at the close of the narrative is remarkable, especially in the work of semi-fiction. Sen, through his work, also takes a jibe at the prevailing system where businesses have direct correspondence with government and higher authorities for its own benefit. A good example would be Rathor, the rich and influential businessman having ties with the police and forest authorities. In conclusion, River of Stories, through the medium of a graphic novel, beautifully comments and takes a jibe at the construction of dams across Narmada River. It simultaneously presents and juxtaposes the conditions and concerns of modern cityscape alongside that of the natural environment of the countryside. The displacement of the Adivasis told in the story is not just physical but also cultural and emotional, for their identity remains intricately connected to the land. Also helps highlight that notions of development and modernization remain subjective, and the concerns for those that suffer primarily need to be addressed first, and whatever alternatives are planned should benefit all that are concerned. Although the illustrations are intricate and detailed, the narrative flow is not compromised. Scenes that overlap are intercut with the drama and style of the filmmaker. Instead of using caricatures, the diverse range of character types favors widely recognized peculiarities in expression and attire. The colonial past is reflected in the violence committed by one group against another in the name of development. Saint's determination to let the tragedy flow and not the anger takes center stage, which is also his highest and greatest accomplishment. In contrast to the terrible imagery of other famous artist memorialists like Joe Sacco and Art Spiegelman, Saint's work conveys a philosophical grief. He sings instead of yelling, just like Malgu Gayan. He takes us back to the earlier India with its hospitable populace, banks, and thriving forests. And he challenges us to envision a better future than the depressing, dirty farce we currently live in. I quote in an interview that Orijit Sen gave to Paul Gravett, and remember we have done Paul Gravett in the earlier units. We have done an article by Paul Gravett because he has worked significantly on Indian graphic novels. I quote, "But River of Stories did help in spreading the message of the environmental movement to a whole new audience of urban school and university audiences that were unaware of the impact such large-scale development projects were having on communities, lands, and resources. I still meet people who tell me they read River of Stories years ago and it helped change the way they look at things like development and the rights of indigenous people in India. It was translated into Hindi and distributed in small photocopied batches among activists too." Unquote. Thank you.